Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome tonight. So if you're wondering what sonification cubes, activism, and inner devils have in common, well, they will all be here in our event tonight, believe it or not. Today we have the third out of 5 stage of climate grief, anger. In particular, we will focus on how can we channel negative emotions, such as anger, and transform it in positive actions. I'm Alessandro. I just finished my PhD here in TU Delft in climate change, adaptation, and damages, and I will be your moderator today. The format of the session, we have 3 speakers and 1 artist installation. There will be a lot of interaction with the audience, so yeah, I'm excited to hear your thoughts. We have just like a few rules, which is basically be respectful, listen to other people, and only speak when you have the microphone. So it's very simple. Okay, so who was here already previous times? Raise your hand. Both times? Only 1 time? So who is new here? Okay, so we have quite some new faces. Do maybe any of you want to share why you're here? For instance, for people that have been here already?
Yeah, well, I listened to the other ones, so I've been here like in a different way. But yeah, for me, anger is an emotion that I don't really know how to handle it or something. I try to avoid conflict as much as I can. So I'm very curious to see, yeah, what you think about it, and maybe I can learn something from it.
Great. Yeah, indeed, it's like very like aligning with the form, with our goal, which is try to transform anger into some positive action. Someone else, maybe someone with the new people, wants to share?
Oh, sorry. So for me, I just have like very mixed feelings, and I try to help. Like I study sustainable energy technology, and I try to help it in the other way. But I've been feeling judged for going to demonstrations and expressing my feelings in that way. So yeah, I want to see how I can help myself go through this.
Does anyone else feel this way? Maybe wants to, yeah, find new, yeah.
Well, in my case, I'm quite angry myself because of recent events. I'm from Mexico. Some cities were destroyed by hurricanes recently, so it's kind of pissed. So I'm, let's say, interested in seeing how this is handled in, let's say, in the context of, or the perspective of a different country, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very interesting. So I think to measure how angry are you today, we can first make a little game. So we can maybe move, and here go people that are not very angry, or not angry at all. Here we made people that are just a little angry, and here people that are very angry. So maybe you can just move a second. If you can?
If you can manage it already, your angriness. I don't know where.
Just, I think the focus is if you're angry or not. Then if you can manage it, it's a second stop. Well, I think, nice. So it seems like most people are quite angry, but not everyone, which is interesting. So maybe you can a moment discuss with your neighbor here, someone close to you, why, like how anger is impacting you, and also how other people anger is impacting you. So maybe just take a moment to discuss here with your neighbor. Okay, it's nice. It's nice to see very much interaction, because that's why we are here, to talk with each other and share our thoughts and feelings. So maybe someone wants to share from not the very angry ones. How is anger impacting you and others, maybe?
Yeah, I just told I'm sometimes very angry, but I want to manage it because it's destructive for yourself. So I choose not to be in the state of angriness. So I really am interested about tonight. It's very useful to change it to the other side. Sorry.
So you potentially would be very angry, but you manage it to move yourself from there to here, which is a very very interesting. Someone else maybe want to share from here? How is also maybe?
So I think I have a different view. I think anger can be extremely productive and extremely valid. But I don't feel angry right now, because I think like coming together on an evening like this with like-minded people it always gives me a sense of joy and positive energy and hope to sit down with a load of people who want to talk about these issues and want to figure things out.
Nice. So it's like you feel that more angry is better because it's more action, more things, more... Okay. And what about the angry of other people? Do you also maybe want to share something about it? No. It's like...
Yeah, I could say something on that. So I'm involved in climate activism, and sometimes you get angry reactions from people who oppose, demonstrators being in the streets or oppose acts of civil disobedience. So yeah, I think it's important to try and respect the negative emotions of others towards activism, whilst also sticking true with your own view that what you're doing is right.
Yeah, sometimes maybe your anger to other people can stimulate other anger, and it's like, we're gonna delve into that today. So from not a bit angry people, anyone want to share something interesting with your neighbor? Something came out from a discussion? Yes?
Well, yeah, I am sometimes a bit angry. Not right now. But I kind of also enjoy the fact that I'm angry, because that means that I care and that there's energy. And I kind of accepted the fact that I'm trying all that I can, but I don't have an influence over the whole world. And if we need a crisis, then that's apparently what we need. So I kind of found peace with it, I guess.
Nice. So being angry means like being alive, actually, and also maybe you think you're in a stage that we kind of deserve a punishment from something. Okay. Anyone else here wants to share? Maybe also how you feel angry with other people, how other people's anger is affecting you. Do you feel like when you are in a angry community, angry society is affecting how you feel about angry? How angry are you? Maybe.
So yeah, I think the world is very polarized right now, and depending who you talk to, they have different opinions, and they're really strong. So there is a lot of negative perspective onto people that do activism, and yeah, that does make me very angry to see them angry, because it's like, yeah, we're trying to do something and they're trying to suppress us. That's the feeling I have.
So you feel that they want to take you out, and so that makes you even more angry. And you think that being even more angry, how is affecting the people that are making you angry?
I'm quite diplomatic, so I don't usually channel that anger in my discussions. But I try to always de-escalate things and try to have a nice, rational discussion to just have a nice perspective from both sides. Yeah.
Nice. Anyone else wants to share here why you're here? Why you feel in the super angry space?
Yeah, I feel like what you were saying about trying to de-escalate is I relate to that. At the same time, I feel like I always put it on myself to de-escalate, and that is actually causing me to bottle up my anger, which means I'm more angry, even though I'm not acting angry. On the inside, I'm really angry.
Interesting, yeah, because indeed there is a bit this trade-off of like a lot of angry means a lot more, but also could actually, yeah, stop you to doing things. And yeah, okay, so I think you can now go back to your seat because we can introduce our first speaker, which is a philosopher, researcher, and a teacher. He has published several books on madness and mental health. With his latest book, Shocker Effect, deals about philosophy in terms of climate change. So a warm applause to Wouter.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do is I've prepared a text. I'm going to read that aloud. And you should not become angry during my reading my text, but keep your questions for after my text. It takes about 10 minutes. Okay? Now I can see better. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood with your empty words. Thus began Greta Thunberg's famous angry speech 4 years ago, in 2019 at the United Nations in New York. That performance exemplifies our theme of anger in the context of the climate crisis. Some thought it was a wonderful speech, showing how deeply climate change affected Greta and how serious the crisis is. For others, it was yet another sign that the whole climate movement was based on exaggerated climate hysteria. I will return to the political context of anger later. First, I will zoom in on anger as an emotion. Emotions consist of feelings, but always contain cognitive content as well, and relate to a state of affairs in the small or the large outside world. For example, you become happy or sad because you assess a situation or fact in a positive or in a negative way. What about anger? Anger usually relates to perceived injustice done to you. You may get angry if someone cheats you or harms you. Anger implies that there is a consciously acting person or agency that harms you or tries to harm you. Anger thus presupposes a perpetrator-victim schema as a model of reality. The energy of the emotion of anger focuses outward in the form of indignation, recrimination, and aggression. Sometimes the anger focuses on the alleged perpetrators by way of revenge or reparation. More often, anger is unfocused, merely filling the environment with an atmosphere like an impending thundercloud. As just mentioned, underneath anger usually lies perceived injustice. And anger is often seen as the first sign of a person becoming aware of that injustice. Of course, much good can come from that awareness, and the actions that may follow from it create space to express your own grief, live out the energy of anger, and process it into further constructive activities aimed at, for example, climate justice. Anger can thus contribute to waking up from paralysis, apathy, and despondency, and taking action against perceived injustice. But besides being a sign of becoming aware of injustice, anger has not much to offer, I think. Encouraging, nurturing, or holding on to anger is not recommended for several reasons. For a start, people who are depressed, are stuck in oppressive relationships with others, are sometimes advised to get angry, to express the pain and sorrow inflicted by others in order to stand up for themselves and their own desires. On the other hand, however, a lot of people are also in therapy because they find it difficult to control their own anger and aggression, because they immediately turn perceived hurt or injustice inflicted by others into anger and outbursts of rage. Now you could say, the truth lies in the middle, that maybe some people should get angrier about the climate and others less angry. But that is a too generalized conclusion, and the matter is much more complicated. First of all, there's gender variation. More men than women have anger problems. Women are more likely to get depressed and damage themselves. Men are more likely to get aggressive and more likely to damage others. Therefore, a general call to express dissatisfaction with injustice through anger is a typically male method of resolution. In addition, anger has also cultural and social aspects. In some groups, for instance, in hierarchically organized companies, which define the world in terms of profit and loss, competition and struggle, anger is also a more common expression or emotion strategy than in less competitive organizations that strive for harmony and equality. My assessment is that anger as an emotional strategy is more valued among those forces in society that also have a bad impact on nature, people and the climate. Or in other words, cultivated anger does not belong to the so-called soft values, which is precisely what many have placed their hopes on for the future. With anger, you may appear to be resisting injustice and oppression, but in fact you are merely staying within the system, in which human actors respond to other human actors with high energy and aggression. You respond to an action with a reaction, which itself becomes a new action. In this respect, there's a problem with the whole movement that calls itself activist. Terms like activism, as well as movement and a phrase like getting moving, belong all to the system that people oppose. Actions, activities, and activism consume large amounts of energy, at least some of which has a significant admixture of fossil energy. I therefore would advocate the replacement of the term activism for the term passivism, with a double S and a V, in the hope that the change in language brings a change in thinking and ultimately in action and the world. What is missing in anger are elements of humility, guilt, shame, responsibility, and also detachment. The angrier someone gets, and the more angry people there are, the stronger the idea of injustice becomes. But anger is only a reaction to perceived injustice. Whether injustice is actually there and what the truth about the situation is cannot be inferred from the level of anger. Yet the stirring up of anger is often experienced as a strengthening of an argument for a cause, a deepening of an unquestionable truth. Remember Greta's performance. Sometimes people who are angry do get their way just because they act so angry, because others are directly or indirectly frightened by the aggression hidden in anger. But those who, because of the results of anger, see it as a good emotion strategy, should remember that it is not only on your side of things that can deploy anger. Anger and aggression can also be deployed for goals that you, on the contrary, do not agree with at all, which was already mentioned beforehand by you, I think. Anger can become a tool of manipulation, used precisely to spread untruth, injustice, and violence. Angry people may be manipulated by others, but it is also possible that you manipulate yourself. For example, you can act out your own anger extra fiercely in order to remain deaf to the other person and become deaf to yourself as well. Because you actually know you are wrong, that you are overshadowing your own sadness or your own sense of guilt or shame, which you then try to drown out in anger. In conclusion, anger may be necessary for a while. It may be an expression of becoming aware of something, but to further explore exactly what the truth is, how injustice can be fought, anger is only distracting, obfuscating, and usually does not benefit to any good cause. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Wouter. Yeah, very inspiring. So now we have a prompt for the audience, maybe a bit. How do you relate to your anger impulses on a personal level? So, yeah, we were hearing also before some people maybe feel angry, but they try to de-escalate. Some people maybe react with even more angry. Is there anyone here who wants to share how do you relate to your anger impulses on a personal level? It's like, how do you manifest your anger? Yes?
I actually think that there are different type of anger. So I think that there are, for example, at first that is a burst of anger, like something that really burns you, like as an impact, which usually I react as freezing because I'm kind of like blocking it because you cannot escape like a civil behavior on something that hits you that much. But then if you, at the same time, there is also a more latent level that is always present, that becomes a kind of frequency, a very noise frequency that is always there. And that doesn't go away and is tiring, so tiring, and is always there.
But
so these two levels, I would say.
Yeah, how does that second level relate to...
Is about the same injustice. It's because if you don't let it pop out somehow, then it becomes lower, but then very long in time, because it stays there.
Yeah.
In a certain way.
I would not call that second form anger. I would call it reflection on injustice as a ground from where you can fight injustice or do something with injustice or against injustice.
But it stays there, though. Huh?
yeah, but yeah.
It stays there.
But are you then still in this so-called perpetrator-victim scheme? Because in fact, that was the point of my whole talk. Anger seduces you to always think in the scheme of they, the perpetrators, and we, the victims.
No, I think that the second one, the more time goes on, makes me approach the thing from another level.
Okay, so then you become open to humility and guilt, etc.
I wouldn't use these big words because it's still a work in progress. I don't want to steal so much time. But no, I think it changes the scheme that you said.
So it's like you could either burst it or keep it with yourself and slowly absorb it. Interesting. Yeah. I think it would be nice to make a little exercise. So if you now think yourself how you could, how anger is affecting you, how you manifest, how you react to it, maybe you can think for yourself in 30 seconds, and then maybe you can discuss with your neighbor. Like some people maybe angry become activists, some people try to suppress it. So I imagine that people can act in a very different way. Yeah, how is also affecting you, on a personal level, on a social level. You maybe absorb your anger, you keep it for yourself, or you go to other people, see if they are angry like you. Maybe indeed you can channel it and create something nice. So maybe you can discuss with your neighbor now. Yeah, in pairs, or find your nearest neighbor. Okay, guys. Let's try to collect some maybe interesting thoughts. It's nice to see all this discussion. Now we can, is there anyone who would like to add some interesting things want to say? Your group, what was some interesting finding of this interaction?
I think what I found interesting is that well, on a social level, people we try to express it in a different way than in a non-social way, and I think suppression is often what we choose, and that might not be the best solution, but it's what prevents escalation and polarization between people.
I think that's connect very well to what was said before, that maybe people feel more angry but try always to escalate. Do you feel the suppression comes more from you or from the society?
I think both, but I definitely suppress it myself as well, because like I said, I try to prevent escalation, but also maybe from society in terms of getting judged, that I try to suppress it because I don't want people to judge me as a person who is like very angry about something.
So there is a bit of like it's not morally acceptable sometimes to be very angry about something. Someone else? Some group maybe had some interesting, yes.
So yeah, sometimes I feel like I am able to suppress it or like just dissociate because it's just too much to handle it. And like I try to like help in a different way. But when you actually like get the reality of it and understand what's going on, it's hard to stay calm. And I channel it through a lot of debates. I try to make structural debates that can be good for both people, but still being confronted from what people believe or how people perceive activism or people that believe in climate change, even that, yeah, it's just something that will make you angry sometimes.
Yeah. Perfect. So there is a sort of way in which your anger, is manifested. I mean, I think maybe our speakers want to also share something very quick.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry? Yeah. I can also just speak like this. Yeah. That's nice. Yeah, it's an interesting question to think about. I think that I think we have to approach anger in a much more broad and diverse way, and we were talking about that here together, as well as certain levels of anger can be quite useful, and you remain quite rational. But there's an energy, right? There's energy. I don't accept this, right? And I think anger starts at clarity. So even before there's any sense of anger, you can just feel like someone's very clear about their boundaries, and they don't feel angry at all yet. And then maybe if it's necessary, the anger can be a bit up and like, no, I don't accept this, right? And so it's interesting. I'm involved in climate activism. When I look at being part of the I-12 blockade, for instance, that there is a sense that people go there partly because they're angry and they're frustrated. But once they're there, I would say people, the times that I was there on the road, they're angry, but they're also calm. And in their communication with the police, for instance, they're calm, and irritatingly calm even, right? And on purpose, right? And so there's not a sense of sort of like hostility between the activists and the police. The people on the road are very calm, but they're there because they're angry, right? So there's an interesting interplay of activation, and then, I think it's about wielding your anger in ways that are useful. Just like with a child, maybe it's like no, and maybe you get a little bit more strict, like no. That's enough. I mean this, right? Yeah. So it's not. So I see a lot. I also do martial arts, and I see a lot of people who either hide their anger completely or they will explode at some point. And I think there's so much to learn in that in-between space between clarity and some real anger. And and I think Greta Thunberg is a good example of this, actually.
Yeah, I think what is important from what you said is that it also depends what at stake. So it's like, okay, maybe sometimes I'm morally push my society to not be angry, but sometimes when you understand what's at stake, actually you cannot, you say, okay, it doesn't matter. But sometimes it's also important to draw a line, so when it's actually... Okay, I think on this regard, our next speaker... of course. Yeah.
Well, I think that the examples that the text provided gave, I think, more so the examples of outbursts of powerlessness, like the frustration with that you don't have any power when doing something. I think Greta is always kind of angry, but you don't notice it. and that the outburst on stage wasn't really an angry outburst, but more a plea out of powerlessness towards like the literally governing body of the world. So that I don't think that the point that she was called angry was actually the point that she was very angry. She's always very angry, I think, at most people. And so I think the thing about anger is more that it's the productive part behind activism and most movements within the world, and that the powerlessness is what we think right now of the anger outburst.
Okay. I think you can also continue with the speaker. So yeah, our next speaker is a master student in the Faculty of Industrial Engineering here at TU Delft, and is gonna go talk about his involvement in activism. And yeah, Bram, the floor is yours. Does it work? Or?
Does it work correctly now? Or
No, I don't. I'm not sure.
Okay. Should I then just use the mic then? It's fine. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Hi, I'm Bram. I was invited here as the more of student activist perspective, I think. So that's what I'll mostly talk about today. So a little bit about me. I am Bram. Hi. I'm a student at the IDE faculty, masters right now. Pretty fun. I'm originally from The Hague, so I'm a Dutch person. Might give a bit of context of how I behave now. And as most IDE students or students in general at the TU Delft, I want to contribute something to society. And that's why I chose the studies and why I did certain things within my studies. A second part of me is also why I'm invited here, is because I'm part of an activistic organization. This is End Fossil Occupy. We are an international movement which is horizontally organized. And we think that the fossil subsidies that universities get are unethical and are interfering with our academic processes. Now, we are youth-led, so most of the times it's just people that either work at the universities or are studying at the universities. And we're horizontally organized, as I already said. And as two main points of our philosophy, we are environmentalist and anti-capitalist in nature. So that also might explain some other things that in the presentations might be said. And you might know us from the stickers or the logos that you can see somewhere. So I wanted to contribute something to society with my studies. And one of the biggest things that I noticed as a high school student was climate change. Because I'm a white male, so there weren't a lot of things like fucking with my general life. And climate change was one of the bigger hurdles for our society at that point, I thought. So within my studies, I tried a lot. I tried to design new interventions as a design student. I tried to develop new systems to work within. I advocated for new solutions. I read the books. I followed the courses about climate change and sustainable engineering. I joined discussions. I basically walked the walk within the system that I got. And my conclusion was that the system is kind of fucked that we work in right now. Because as a general rule, I think that a system focused on profit and growth can't become sustainable in the time frame that we want it to be. So I think this is very important for understanding the climate struggle. So when you come to this conclusion within your studies, it's like talking to a wall. Because you're trying to implement something new, and it should be profitable, or it should imply growth or some positive thing within society. And when you actually want to get to a sustainable level, sometimes that's not possible. So the wall is something that you walk against, and that's very frustrating. But you know, I could have kept on with my studies. I could have kept advocating for stuff and just stayed within my bubble, basically. But within the TU Delft, there was something that made me actually angry, very angry. There was the fossil influence at our campuses and in our education in general. Within this presentation, I will mostly focus on Shell, but know that there's a lot of other companies, mostly all the oil companies, that have very, very much influence within our studies, basically. They are everywhere. They are the sponsors of most of the dream teams. This one is the Hyperloop. They are the main sponsors of most of them, and a lot of events that are happening, like lunch talks and general lectures within the TU Delft. They are also always very present at the Delftse Bedrijfsdagen. And they give us lecturers and professors. They pay them full time so that they can give lectures here part-time, and they also provide some of the slides even for these lectures. So it suffices to say that they have a lot of influence within our studies. And I think that's quite inherent to TU Delft itself, because this university is basically founded to do geo-exploration and colonialism in the south. So I think it's very hard to see the TU Delft outside of its fossil bubble. So I joined AntFossil. I thought it was very important to advocate for a university without this influence, with a true free academic purpose. So we have a few demands that we always like to advocate for. We want no new projects that help the fossil industry in growing or in, for example, drilling for new oil. There shouldn't be any recruitment events at the TU Delft campus or anything TU Delft related. And we should provide academic leadership within this world, which means that as a knowledge institution, we should lead by example and, for example, openly support ending the fossil subsidies that the Dutch government gives out right now. Well, then I think an important thing to talk about is the friction between academia and activism. Originally, activism had a very important role within institutions like universities or general educational institutions. And I think that in recent years, it's become more of a struggle to do so. We heard a lot of our members and just general activists within the campus that they get negative comments from the people that grade their studies, or in general that the university itself doesn't like activism to happen on its campus, because they are here to keep the status quo happening, and activism is inherently against that status quo, I think. So it's a form of disruption for them and not a form of, how do you say it, exploration of opinion, basically. So can activism be effective in a constitutional change within an academic environment? I think it's the last tactic that you should do. We as an organization also always first talk with the boards, try to find a compromise or something. But if that's not what is working, then you should do some disruptive action or just general activism to create awareness in general. Disruption is the only power that you as a group have when there's no democratic influence that you can have, or when there's no way to give feedback or actual change within the system. So you can disrupt the system and then they have to listen to you. It's quite effective. Yes, also for us as a movement specifically, some unis have already broken the ties with the fossil companies, so it's actually possible. And so that's very nice. And when you disrupt something, people actually see it. So it puts the subject of it on the agenda. For example, with the fossil subsidies, before there was any disruptive action around it, the TU Delft didn't even talk about it and didn't even want to give any information to the press, for example, for 10 years. And when in the entire country people started to ask questions and tried to organize against it, there was a lot of media attention to it, and the TU Delft actually had to do some steps to give more clarity and to give more inspraak, I don't know the English word for it, to its followers and members. So yeah, it ain't nice to do, but I think it's needed when effective change is needed. So yeah, for the prompt that I had, I think that what can I do, which is a question that's asked a lot of times around climate change. I think it's too individualistic and it makes the solution nothing, because you as a person have very little effect on the climate, because the climate is a global struggle. And I think putting it on the person makes it hopeless out of principle. And I think people do that very purposefully. So I think a better question to ask is, what can we influence as a group? So how can we channel our anger to and our frustration that the system isn't working for us into an effective collaborative change or struggle? So yeah, what can we influence is, I think, the best question to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Bram. So, what can we influence? Is there anyone here who maybe has like a positive experience with influencing a sort of stakeholder? on the direction they wanted to, and maybe want to share it to start as a positive example? Yes.
I was involved with the Extinction Rebellion protests in April of 2019 in the UK, which immediately after those, the UK set a net zero target, and this was the first highly developed economy to do so, and now we're at a point where the majority of the world's economy is under some kind of net zero target. Who knows whether that's going to be enough, but that is progress due to civil disobedience.
And you think that how was the influence done in that case, specifically?
There was a very clear set of demands. So there was a call for net zero by 2025, which was obviously mainly shifting the Overton window rather than a workable policy. But yeah, there was the mass peaceful demonstration by lots of people. And as the speaker just said, it was extremely disruptive. Some of the largest bridges in the city were occupied. So traffic was rerouted for weeks and weeks, and lots of members of the public were really in support of this, because at that period of time, you know, the Greta effect was in full force. People were thinking things need to really change on this.
So when we reflect also the anger at social level, I guess indeed channeling many people anger, but in a peaceful way, is actually one of the maybe better way to influence something. Anyone else wants to share?
Yes, thank you very much for the talk. I think that we can influence by repeating the previous slide as much as you can. Because, you know, here, I'm afraid nobody will leave this debate and go to the supermarket and find food that's not wrapped on plastic in individual packages. That's one. And there are many people who still believe in that they will go by car to their vacation instead of flying, and they will solve the problem. So, yes, we cannot do it alone, and it's not the responsibility of the consumer. That's the point.
But you think it's the responsibility of the consumer to, I don't know, push the producer to something?
That's what these people do. That's exactly that. It is about the system. So how can I choose to not buy yogurt that is not in a small plastic cup, and so on? So the consumer has not those choices. So it's only the pressure and the price of recycling and transferring the responsibility to those who produce. So far, the system is about transferring the price and responsibility to the consumer. And that's the paradigm shift. And it's not a secret. We know it already, right?
Yeah. I think indeed to maximize the profits, they are not going to cut the price and increase the quality. Okay, so do we have other interesting example? Maybe someone wants to share? Yeah.
I was involved in, yeah, of course, yeah. We keep doing that dance. I was involved a little bit at the end with the Fossil Vrij campaign to get the ABP pension fund to divest its 15 billion of investments in fossil fuel, out of fossil fuels. And that was a 7-year or something campaign, lots and lots of work, of constant pressure on this pension fund, which is a pension fund that a lot of the people working here are also members of, including me as a researcher. You know, civil servants, and all that mounting pressure and the increasing legitimacy of the voices that were added, perceived legitimacy by ABP especially, right? The mayors, professors, and so on. The sort of very strong carrying of this message. It was surprising that they completely flipped, right? A lawsuit was being prepared against ABP by Fossil Vrij, and that's when I sort of joined in. But it was a few months later. They just announced that they would divest everything. And I think that's a really powerful example. And we're researching all the elements of why that happened exactly. But that's sort of, you know, what can we influence, right? Because a pension fund like that is also an interesting example, because it might be much harder to influence Shell than it might be to influence their investors, right? Because a pension fund is just there to be responsible for the pensions of its members. And they might be much easier to convince, and clearly they were. So it's also about what targets do you choose. Yeah?
Do you think that that pressure was done through anger, or more other different feelings, or maybe more like research? And
there was like an escalation of anger, I would say. I think that it started with civil conversations, and then when ABP didn't listen, at some point there was a lawsuit being prepared right? Which is an interesting form of, okay, we are now bringing the stick instead of just sort of the conversational cookies, right? So you can call it anger or not, but it's definitely more conflict-oriented means of communication, let's say.
Yeah, I think this is interesting maybe to hear from you, because sometimes it looks like anger, anything but anger can work, but maybe also anger can be self-defeating. So is this really anger?
I think that the stress that is laid on acting in the outside world prevents that you do not see the other side, that you are still a consumer, of course. We can always say, well, it is on the other side, they have to change and I'm just a victim. But of course, well, what I did, I am part of a collective change, and what I as part of a we influenced is that I talk with people in my environment who still fly to tourist destinations all over the world, and I talk to them, and that is, yeah, that's part of a collective change. So I think this dualism between I as a consumer, I can do nothing, and let them make flying impossible, and only then I stop flying. Well, that's not what I said. No, okay, but that's the extreme end of.
You're pushing my argument, huh? That's not what I said. I can also revert your argument and say, okay, so I think we produce 160 million hectoliters of wine per year in Europe, and we import 150 or half of it, and all this by ship. Why we do this? Because French wine, Spanish wine becomes very expensive here, becomes very expensive in South Africa. Then we import their stuff, then the price goes high, and then 2 months ago, the French government destroyed the wine to keep the price. So let's stop the ships and let's fly people all over the world to meet people. And then we influence by discussing and constructing something. So it's a completely different point of view of not being engaged.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, Bram, if you want to...
does that work again? No, it doesn't. Yeah, I think the thought process about this is very interesting, because you recognize that as a consumer you have very little influence within your system. And I also think that as a consumer you can't be criticized for functioning within a system that you cannot escape. You cannot escape consumerism within the society. You cannot escape your yogurt packaging, for example. The thing, however, that you can do is change the system that is trying to force you within it. So advocate as a group of people for new changes. You can vote, for example, and if there's nothing good to vote for example, in these elections, you should do activism about it. So advocate that the new packaging laws aren't taxed on the consumer, but advocate that the companies that produce those bloody packages are the ones that are getting taxed for them. So I think that in this very hyper-individualistic society, we are being forced at feeling hopelessness. And I think that we shouldn't. We shouldn't feel hopelessness. Like, the society is formed by us as people, as a collective. And we are a collective, basically. So we as a collective should try to change it. Nobody likes the packaging, but we all want to have a safe world. But there are very small people, very few people in society that profit a shitload from those packagings and just do nothing for it, give us as a society nothing in return, only that they make a shitload of money. And that sucks. Like, we don't have to pay 25 cents extra for that packaging, but that person can live with $1 million less to make more sustainable packaging. So we should advocate for a better system in which the needs of the consumer are being put first and not the means of the needs of the stakeholders, basically. I think that's better.
Yeah. Another round of applause. Okay, after this nice discussion, I think we can move to the artwork, which is presented by the resident artist of Studium Generale. She's like a PhD candidate in IUAV University of Venice and the Royal Faculty in the Royal Academy of Arts here in the Netherlands. So Letizia, yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It sounds like a lot of acronyms, but it's nothing scaring. I will just move briefly there. So thank you, everyone. The scope of having actually an installation during this type of lectures is to redesign the relationship that we have with this very strange and amorph matter, which is the emotion linked to something very difficult, such as the climate change in progress, turbulence that we're living. So it all started like about anger with, I think, one of the most difficult entities that I had to approach, because as I said, not just it is an amorph, but then it is, do I really want to induce anger in people? Is it fair? Do I want actually to make people angry? Should people be angry, or how does it work? And then I just thought, okay, there was this very strange song of the early 20s that was still running into my mind, which is called Anger Never Dies by Overphonics. And then I just thought, okay, if we want to redesign the relationship with something, to really start changing the action, to reversing the perspective, to actually collecting and connecting the dots, what if we give sound to something that usually sound is not audible? So the sonification process is actually based on anger, how should it sound? And what is actually that doesn't die, that is in us and within us, especially in the Netherlands. So you will find 3 different stations that actually give sounds to something that doesn't die, which is the forever chemicals. So it's a jump of scale, but you can actually navigate the first map published this year, and only available by Le Monde, which is actually the only newspaper that was able to keep the map on the internet. So you can navigate actually what are these forever chemicals, which are basically molecules that cannot be broken. So apparently will stay forever with us, within us, and the Netherlands is one of the hotspots of Europe. You can navigate the map and then jump into a sonification of the microscope images of these forever chemicals in our blood. And as the forever chemicals are in our tissues, you will hear actually the sound of them. You can actually see what also stays there forever, like these black dots in our blood, which is our angry tweets. So these 2 visual assignments, what stays trapped in the net forever of our soft tissue, and also what we express and stays trapped forever. And you will hear the sound of this. And in the 3rd station, you can actively touch and modify the sound of some of the most polluted site of the Netherlands by PFAS, so the forever chemicals. And with your inverse pressure, you can actually have an agency on the sounds of field recordings of these sites. One of the most famous is in Amsterdam, and it has more than 2 million nanogram per liter of PFAS, and it is currently there. So it's up to you. It's an installation made to be experimented, so I invite you to try and to hear the sounds. The pitches are made and based on something that is not pleasant, but yet is still there, and it is revealed, which is the misophonia. And is actually a series of pitches that our brain perceive as something very difficult to process, but at the same time makes us having a shift of relationship and impulses. So this is yours, and the entity is called Anger Never Dies, like Overphonics pop song.
We can now move to our last speaker, which is an associate professor of transformative imagination at the Utrecht University. Yeah, you know.
Thank you.
The floor is yours. A warm applause.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks for your patience. I know it's getting late and near dinner time. But I have a very interactive session for you that maybe teaches you something about yourself, hopefully. It's going to be an exercise together, a meditation even. So, yeah, I'm Joost. I've worked all around the world on climate policies using future scenarios. My background is really in sort of thinking about complex problems and thinking about how different future scenarios impact decision-making. But I was a little bit stuck in that world sometimes, where only very incremental changes might be possible in the policy space when disruption might be more necessary. And we're going to explore anger and your inner wildness today, and that's part of the meditation. So I've gone to some different stuff, let's say. This is The World Burning. This is the album cover of my metal band. So I'm a singer in a black metal band where I get to express a lot of anger on behalf of all of us. And this is the cover of our album there. And Flor Avellino, a colleague of ours, a professor of change and power, has made this claim once that sort of our internal sense of powerlessness is a greater obstacle to change than the structures of power around us. And she would probably say, and she has said, that that's of course putting it a little bit one-sided, but it's a powerful thing to think about, right? Anyway, our internalized powerlessness, as you said as well, is a big obstacle. Let's agree on that. So what I work on in daily life is I'm very interested in the way that action, that the resonant actions, things that we have discussed, this sort of activist work, but all kinds of ways that really impact the world, impact how people think about change and how it opens up people's imaginations. Action in the present, in a way, can do a lot more about how people think what's possible in terms of the future than making up a story about the future together. But on the other hand, people are doing a lot of creative practice, so a lot of wonderful work to imagine alternatives, and how does that work impact the present, and how does that work impact action? And I think this is a wonderful example of that, right? How do we get inspired by your work now to take that into sort of like action? And the third thing that I research is something called imagination infrastructures, because there's a real political question here about who gets to imagine the future. This is Delft, and here there's a lot of designerly thinking going on, and you could say that here, you know, the elites of the future wield their designerly skills to come up with what futures we might imagine. But there's some limitations to this as well, and some real sort of lack of political participation there. That's interesting to look at, and how this can be opened up. One thing that I find really interesting personally, that I hope helps you with your anger, because I heard, for instance, you mentioned that you were stuck in anger sometimes, right? And is that I think anger, if you think about seriousness and playfulness, so I work a lot on game design and in sort of game-based media. If you think about seriousness and playfulness, there's this sort of false opposition that people think that we cannot be playful around difficult issues because we must be serious, and that this is an opposition. I actually think that these are sort of two ways into the depth and the complexity and the mystery of life. I think that a lot of people, when they say we must keep things serious, they're sort of here in the sort of sleepwalking level, going along with society, working within the system and trying to do something there. And that anger, but also fear, grief and sadness, all these emotions, but also wonder and awe at the depth of life, are all here in the deeper levels of seriousness. If we look at life very seriously, you know, we might get angry, sad, hopeful, etc. at the same time. On the other hand, there's playfulness, right? So you can be a little bit playful, you can make a joke with your colleagues about stuff, or you can be deeply playful and see everything around you as a joke. In many ways, the systems that we are currently live in are insane, ridiculous, painfully funny. It's like laughing at a funeral, right? So laughing at a funeral is sort of where we go into deep seriousness and deep playfulness, and I think that's where we find that sort of depth and mystery and complexity. I hope this helps already a little bit with working with anger, because I think there should be space for all these difficult emotions, and at the same time the space for playfulness and sort of that openness that generates, right? There's a really wonderful paper by a sociologist called Erica Summers-Effler, one of the best papers I've ever read, which is about emotion, consciousness, and social movement formation and the micro potential of social change. So this is a paper that talks about, it's about women's movements, in this case as a case study, and it talks about why people get activated to join social movements, or why don't they, right? Why do they stay in the current system? And in this paper, it's a lot about creating the space together for difficult emotions to be shared, things that people normally don't accept as sort of legitimate emotions, like anger, sadness, fear, maybe joy and playfulness, to create a safe space for that sort of these types of emotions to be shared, to be recognized in each other, so that people can recognize, and that's what you referred to as well, that maybe this problem isn't just with them, right? It's a collective issue. So anger as an activating emotion. what is interesting in the whole discussion we've had today about whether anger is good or bad or what kinds of anger, in Erica's model, she talks about this thing called emotional energy, which is a sense of autonomy, openness, curiosity, and a sense of confidence about the world. When there's high emotional energy and there's anger, anger can be really powerful. When there's low emotional anger and people feel only trapped and disempowered and so on, it can turn into despair and into this sort of this despair version where nothing gets done, right? There's of course a lot of subtlety here because despair can be really powerful as well, right? In Extinction Rebellion they talk about love and despair, for instance, love and rage, but also love and despair. Depends a bit on how this is expressed, I think. So I find it very, very useful to talk about unwelcome emotions that are normally not given space in society. There are lots of these sort of climate conversations where people get to do that. And I want to do this with you, but add a bit of playfulness. So we're going to do an exercise that is sort of in the category of something called shared imaginal practice. It's basically group therapy of some sort and a group meditation at the same time. And this one is called well, it's a sort of open-hearted devils. What we are going to do is to answer this question: what being would you be if you were a devil or a feral spirit, but with a heart full of goodwill toward all life? So we are wild, we are angry maybe, full of rage, but also with an open heart toward all life. And we're going to go through that meditation now, so please close your eyes. Take a bit of time to notice your breath, notice how your body feels. Notice the sounds around you and the sort of whole ecosystem of sound and feeling and experience that is part of your present moment. Notice maybe how your breath naturally slows down a bit as you pay attention to it. And maybe if you can drop your awareness. Let your awareness that's maybe in your head right now just slide down your neck into your body, into the space of your heart and your solar plexus. Notice how your breath touches that area in your chest around your heart and your middle of your chest there. Maybe a little bit down into your belly, into your gut. Now, I want you to imagine what kind of creature you might be that would express all your rage or your sadness, your wildness, your refusal to be domesticated. Feel where your anger is, feel where your grief is about the world, and at the same time feel an open-heartedness toward life. You want the best for all human and non-human beings, but you are going to give space to your anger and your sadness and your frustration, your wild joy that's not accepted as well. If this is the case, if these are the things you're feeling, what kind of creature would you be that would represent all of this unleashed power? So a kind of devil or a kind of wild spirit, a kind of god, a kind of nature god maybe, something like that. And what I would like you to focus on is, how does it feel in your body to be this being? What kind of skin does it have? How big is it? Does it have a tail? Does it have claws or tentacles? Big teeth? What kind of creature are you feeling emerges out of the depth of your sadness and your anger and your joy, ready to be flourishing out of that sort of space inside of you? Take a bit of time. How does it feel to breathe at this creature, to take the breaths of this wild being, this heartful devil? Does your breathing change? How does the feeling of your body change now that you've changed size, changed shape, changed skin? What does your skin feel like? What do your teeth feel like if you've got monster teeth, maybe? What would it feel like to look out from your eyes as this being? Taking a few more breaths, embodied as this creature. Feel the power, feel the unbridled energy, the wild emotionality that gets space. Now I want you to ask yourself, what powers does this being have? Does it have any special powers? Is there anything it can do in the world? And maybe these powers are represented by attributes, by weapons or symbols or articles of clothing. What are the powers of this wild god, this devil, this demon, this wild spirit that represents your inner world, your inner anger and sadness and wildness and joy and darkness, as well as your open heart? Can you see yourself doing things in the world, taking actions, making divine interventions? If you had this power, if you can stand up from your chair and be this being now. Feel for a moment that we're sitting here with all of these wild spirits together. The last question I have for you, wild spirits, demons, devils, is can you imagine yourself in your normal work role? This could be quite funny. As this creature, right? So you're working, you're dealing with colleagues, you're dealing with advisors, teachers, whatever you do. And you are this being now. And you walk into the room, or you fly or glide or swim into the room, whatever it might be. How would you speak with these people about what you would like to do with your life and how you would like to be treated by them from now on? And maybe imagine how they react to you being like this. Right? All right, let's take a few deep breaths. And slowly and intentionally open your eyes again, keeping the sense of that being inside of you. Cool. So that was weird. I would love to hear from some of you about, if you feel, uncomfortable about sharing any of this, don't feel like you have to share, but I would love to hear a few examples. I'm thinking of making a bestiary of, like a Dungeons and Dragons book with people's inner demons and spirits, So I would love to hear from someone. Did anything come to mind from someone that was particularly resonant for you? Or that you think it would be fun to share? Yes, go ahead. A dragon?
Yeah, like a white dragon with fur, but then it just came like bam.
Nice.
So it was really natural. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And then in terms of powers and also with this anger, and we're talking about climate change, right? Maybe it's because I thought back home that here we have a lot of rain, but in Spain we don't usually, and it's becoming a problem.
Yeah.
Like in so many other places.
Yeah.
And this dragon, instead of like, how do you say, like taking fire, like it was water. And then it was just like invoking some kind of rain. And then I thought, what else can it do? And then I can also go to the Antarctica and just like freeze back the poles, right?
And we need that dragon.
Yeah. So I don't know, it was really powerful in that sense. So thank you so much for this exercise.
Thank you, thank you. All right, I would love to hear from someone else, and then maybe also hear a little bit about the end, like how you relate it to the people you work with. I've heard some interesting stories about this before, so go ahead, yes. Yeah, you famously unexpressive of anger. I'm curious what you thought.
So I thought that I would be a giant jellyfish.
Nice.
That is bioluminescent.
Uh-huh.
And so it's pretty calm, but it has very toxic stingers.
I love that. Cold
And,
anger. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the superpower would be that it is able to show people how beautiful the earth is, and in that way make people care.
Nice.
And yeah, how that would relate to my how I would be that jellyfish in real life. I think maybe I could show people what I find beautiful about the earth, and in that way maybe show others why we should care.
Wonderful. Yeah, a massive psychedelic toxic jellyfish. Makes people see it. I love that. That's amazing. Yeah, anyone else want to share? Love to hear maybe two more.
The middle, the tree, the nature creature. That's what was coming into my mind. And in the beginning, it was a kind of volcano to, to let go away all the bad things. So just burn them down.
Burn it all down.
But then this about capabilities of this creature, it has the capability of going into the minds of others and to influence and to let them think, like a kind of Scrooge story.
Oh,
and
yes.
to show them what do you want in your future, and let them change by that way.
I love that. So two powers, burning everything down and showing people their futures and the consequences of their decisions in a Scrooge kind of way. Yeah. Wonderful. I would love to hear another one, if someone's happy to share. We have a little bit of time, I think, so.
Well, I was a massive sort of cloud, devil-like, which was flying around the world, and it was controlling Earth element a bit like, at very, like the power was controlling this element, like rain, fire, and like a bit of everything. And yeah, it was more like fighting, I would say. There was a pushback, but since I was air and cloud, everything was like just going through and not really,
nice.
it was like disassembling, so it was not really effective on it.
Oh yeah.
And actually with all this nature power was more like on a war sort of thing, but very strong and winging. And I would say how it affects the relation to others, it's more like, maybe not really be affected what other people, not necessarily be dismantled by what other people say or think or throw at me, and
love that. Very resilient and sort of like be like water. Yeah, as the activist would say sometimes. Wonderful. Okay, maybe one more. You wanna try?
Sure. Yeah, I felt like a big cow, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, because I think this is from my childhood, but I always saw cows as like the thing that can murder you, but choose not to.
Nice metaphor for the whole anger conversation.
Yeah. So I think that's why I came to a cow pretty quickly, which is not a very special cow, just a very big one.
Massive cow.
Yeah, just very big. It's
Yeah, great. And how do you relate to the people around you as this cow? You could murder them, but you don't.
Yeah. I think quite chill, but in a general environment, really uncomfortable because you're like very big. So like the practical stuff doesn't really work anymore. So yeah, probably need a bigger laptop.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Okay, a final one. We have 2 more minutes, and I want to wrap up, but one more to share. Go ahead.
Well, I also was a ice-breathing dragon.
Oh wow.
So that was interesting.
Yes.
But yeah, I just saw myself sitting in the architecture faculty being like as big as the building. And I just felt like I wanted people not to be scared of me.
Uh-huh.
And then that they would like kind of hug me, but I was like so much bigger than them, and then I could like fly on my back, also to the poles, and then make everything cold again.
This is clearly the solution that's emerging.
Yeah.
We just need ice-breathing dragons.
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing, everyone. This just to sort of wrap this up. This exercise is now becoming part of a project called Playing with the Trouble. That we are hosting between Wageningen, Utrecht, and Eindhoven universities. It's part of the Center for Unusual Collaborations. We just got another year of funding by lottery. We were in a literal lottery today where they just allotted the money by lottery, which is amazing. So we got more funding for it. Anyway, so we're developing this method more, and this whole project is about learning about each other through the power of metaphor and imagination. So I think one of the interesting things about this exercise is that it does touch people in terms of, exploring anger and sadness and power and joy and sort of this imagination. But it's also great to hear about other people, right? About what other people relate to, because the people who have spoken to me about their inner, creatures, to me, I will relate to you like this from now a little bit, right? It's in my head now, so and I think that's really powerful. So we've already sort of gone through all these questions. One thing I wanted to say is that we are developing a video game called All Rise, which is about anger and activism and so on, with some of the best people in the games industry. It's going to be a big, an entertainment game that's about climate justice and climate lawsuits. Very exciting, and it's another example of sort of combining anger and playfulness and joy and grief and everything in this sort of game. Video games don't do this enough, at least not climate games. They're often about very, very calmly telling you what you should be doing, and maybe you should plant some wind turbines here or there. But actually, as we've heard, right, the reality of climate politics is very dynamic. It's filled with emotionality, and this should be in games as well. So we're building a video game about that, and that'll be very exciting. I hope that was interesting somehow, and thank you for your attention.
Was it yours? Nice. So all big demons. It would be interesting to know if there was also like some smaller creature among us. I think we're still a few minutes to wrap up, and I would like to know if someone wants to share what they've learned. For me, I think an important point was that anger by itself is self-defeating, might not really bring to positive results. But if it's combined maybe with other positive emotion and social level or people that feels like you can actually be able to maybe influence and bring positive change. Maybe I would like to know either the speaker or the audience if after what we have learned and seen today wants to share some final thought.
So in my case, I think it was the discussion between individual action and, let's say, being angry at the amorphous sociological monster that we've built. And I think one of the important bits is that both have, both have a point. No, but let's say, I think the issue lies in adding the right dimensions to it. Because it's very easy to feel useless if you just, let's say, extrapolate the necessity to change to this entire system that you cannot really control. But it's also, let's say, down the line, very easy to become extremely frustrated when you do try to change internally and you do all these things, you do no longer fly and so on. And you realize that, well, guess what? It doesn't really mean a lot. It's just like a grain in the sand, right? So I think it's, let's say, a bit more emphasis should be put into I think the right dimensions to it as a way of, let's say, not just becoming like an angry monster that's not very, let's say, productive with the anger, let's say. So, yeah.
I think you still have the mic.
Oh, yeah, I have the same feeling, and always after these kinds of talks, I get depressed, and I go home, and I think in the whole great going of the world, nothing changed, and this is just nothing. But then I think of the famous words of Gramsci, which says, pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. And I think there is this link with what you have been showing.
Yeah, maybe to put, I think all of this that we just did also a little bit in context related to this as well. I think that we had this discussion about solutions not starting with consumers or etc. Right? And I think that what we were just doing with our internal worlds is also not the solution. We cannot transform ourselves just into these heroes and everything will change. The oppressive structures, the systems are still there. But if we can find some space in our own internality to find some power, to find some expressiveness there, that's the starting point in some ways for working together and together sort of influencing change.
And do you think it's more powerful to disrupt the system or build your system within the system?
I think we need absolutely everything, right? We need all these strategies at the same time. We need to disrupt, we need to build within the system, we need to build alternatives outside of the system, we need care, softness, anger, all of these things that need to be happening at the same time, also because people are very different. So if we only have one strategy, lots and lots of people will not feel like they have a place in change.
May I add one relativizing word to this, because this notion of disruption, it's used quite a lot with respect to the system. But I think that this becomes a kind of just, well, not a dogma, but something people say all the time, legitimizing all kinds of disruption. And I think it is very important to say, what system is it exactly that you are disrupting? Because in a very clear sense, we are the system. So we should think about what self-disrupting also means, also on a biological level.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, well, I think time is up. So, well, I think we can continue this very interesting discussion to the drinks and the snacks, and also trying the sonification cubes. And yeah, I hope to see you. Thank you for everyone to being here. I hope to see you next time at the 4th stage of Climate Grief, which will be on the 12th of December. And yeah, thank you so much.